President Trump to move on?
No.
Well, listen, I think with you always have an off.
The only thing that they're interested in, the Democrats, only thing they're interested in is trying to keep Donald Trump from running again for public office. So shameful. So shameful.
I think, I don't know. I don't know if he will vote to convict or not. I think he's certainly leaving it open, and I would argue that him letting that story in the New York Times unanswered that said he was unsure of what he was going to do speaks volumes about where his head is, and the fact that he's certainly not going to whip his caucus on this vote means that more Republicans will vote to impeach the president. But if this is a long trial,
and any Republican that votes for that will never get my vote again in any way, shape, or form, plus 75 million other Republicans.
If this is a long trial,
of this moment.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you all real quickly.
And Christie, shame on you.
Go down the line. Karen Finney first.
They should, but more importantly, the larger test of this moment in history is not just about convicting Donald Trump. It is about accountability.
That's all it's about, is convicting Donald Trump. That's what you've had on your minds for 5 years. I feel sorry for our country going down this dirty politics road.
And that is all we have time for, so I don't get all the yeses or nos. Thank you all very much. We'll be right back.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, Zachy, I'd be scratching too to get the fleas off of me from this Democrat bias press.
President Trump becomes the first president ever to be impeached twice.
He must go. He is a clear and present danger to the nation that we all love.
And she's inciting the riots.
Donald Trump is a living, breathing, impeachable offense.
Simply put, we told you so.
Republicans largely opposed.
It's always been about getting the president, no matter what.
A vote to impeach would further divide this nation.
But 10 vote to impeach.
I am not choosing a side, I'm choosing truth.
The president, fearing Senate conviction, suddenly changes his tone. No true supporter of mine could ever endorse political violence. My guest this morning, Democratic Senator
Oh boy.
New Jersey and Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace of South Carolina. Plus,
Shamefully.
Concerned that the Capitol riot was just the beginning.
What we saw last Wednesday was really the birth of a wide-scale domestic terror movement.
What happened all through all the cities in the last summer here? Millions and millions and billions of dollars. And there's the mayor of Washington, D.C. refused to call the troops in when they were ready to come in and protect the city and the Capitol. January the 6th.
It's really lonely. It's not true.
My guest this morning, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Yeah, Zach, I can't say I blame you for leaving when Chuck comes on. You can't handle two of these.
Editor of National Review and former Democratic Senator from Missouri, Claire McCaskill. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
NBC News in Washington, the longest running show in television history. This is Meet the Press with Chuck Todd.
Good Sunday morning. Donald Trump leaves office this week with the distinction of having lost the popular vote twice and now having been impeached twice. At the same time, Washington, D.C. looks like an armed camp with some 25,000 National Guard troops coming to protect Joe Biden's inauguration. And state capitals from coast to coast, they're bracing for anti-government violence from right-wing terror groups as early as today.
I've not heard anything like that.
Inspired much of this extremism, continues to hold an iron grip on his party. Yes, 10 House Republicans voted to impeach him, but 197 voted no, meaning those yes votes accounted for less than 5% of the House Republican caucus. And our new NBC News poll of registered voters has the president's approval rating holding steady at 43%, with 55% disapproving. It's more or less where his numbers have been throughout most of his presidency in our poll, just right now on the lower end.
Because we know who the crooks are here. It's you, Chuck. You and the media. You're the reason that the biased fake news media for 5 years
the popular vote election results. And looking at the election, while 61% say Joe Biden won legitimately, fully 35% disagree. Among Republicans, 74% say no, that Biden did not win legitimately. 3 in 4 current Republicans.
And he didn't.
So 2 things stand out to us this morning. 1, how can Joe Biden begin healing the country when more than 1 of 3 voters believes he did not win legitimately?
Well, he didn't win it legitimately, but that's not the point. The point is that how are we going to keep the country running forward honestly if we don't have parties from both sides acting like they got some godly principles?
Is because Mr. Trump, with the help of many of his party, purposely lied to them. Let's check in with NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams. He's joining us now. He's got the latest on the investigation into the Capitol riot. But Pete, I know you have some new information about the fears of possible attacks on state capitals. Many of these capitals are bracing for this as early as today. How vulnerable are we today?
Well, I think the concern is high for the violence in state capitals for 3 reasons. First, because of the enormous volume of calls on social media among extremists for attacks on government buildings in many states. Second, because of a worry that with the high level of security...
I've not seen anything like that on any of my Facebook people. And I've got 4,900 friends. No one has said anything about violence anywhere. All fake news.
At least 8 states, governors have activated the National Guard and barriers have been set up around many Capitol buildings.
And I doubt seriously you'll see any violence anywhere by Trump's people. President Donald Trump has never encouraged or incited violence. And I've watched him and all of this politics the whole 5 years.
This is moving very fast because of the enormous quantity of pictures and videos showing the people in there who took part, and because public outrage over what happened has produced an astonishing number of tips.
And why haven't they arrested and used that same technique on the rioters and racists and murderers and arsonists from the summer?
So if you add the local charges, the total arrests are over 100. Among the most recent is a New York man accused of using a police body shield to break an outside window. That allowed people to begin streaming in. The FBI says it has received tips containing more than 150,000 separate photos and videos. And Chuck, one of the more interesting developments, many of those tips are coming from friends and family members.
Wow. Pete Williams on top of the investigation and the threats today.
No legitimate citizen wants to see any violence anywhere at the Capitol or any of the capitals. Violence is ridiculous, and I'm a Trump supporter and have been since he won. I might add, I was also a Barack Obama supporter on his first election. There she is right there, Mayor Bowser. Ask her, Chuck, why she didn't call the troops in.
I will tell you, it looks as if there is more security around the Capitol than we've seen for any other inauguration or any moment since 9/11. Is that a fair description?
I think it is. I think this will be an inauguration unlike any other. I think it was already destined to be, given COVID concerns and some of the limited seating and public access. But having our fellow Americans storm the Capitol in an attempt to overthrow the government certainly warrants heightened security.
You have concentrated these security efforts, obviously, all around, whether it's the National Mall, closing bridges connected to it, the Capitol area itself. All of it very much a fortress. What level of threat do you think we're facing? And are you concerned that we're so secure in one place, they're going to find softer targets in other parts of the city?
Well, Chuck, as you know, I convened our federal law enforcement partners who are responsible for securing this event, the United States Secret Service. This is a national special security event. More than half of those events have been conducted in Washington, D.C., and the Secret Service, working with all federal agencies, is going to make this a safe event. Our special agent in charge talked about the general and specific specific threats that our intelligence apparatus is collecting, both here and across our nation. I'm not only concerned about other state capitals, I'm also concerned about other parts of Washington, D.C. What you're showing is really the federal enclave of Washington, D.C., not where the 700,000 of us live. So our police department, working with our federal law enforcement partners and the United States Army, quite frankly, also has a plan to pivot if we have any attacks in our neighborhoods.
Mayor Bowser, we're about 3 months away from what usually is the sort of the spring break student season. The tour buses are all around D.C., and obviously the pandemic is going to limit that. But how long are we going to be living in a Washington, D.C. that feels like an armed camp? I mean, how long are we going to have to live this way? Because I assume these threats don't go away on January 20th.
I think the question is a bigger question, Chuck. It is, how serious is our country going to take domestic white extremism? And I think what we saw here.
Oh, blame it on white extremism.
We didn't take it seriously.
You're the biggest racist that I've seen, shamefully.
That so-called patriots would attempt to overthrow their government and kill police officers, but that's exactly what happened. So I
guess you haven't seen the Democrats' riots at all. When the president tried to get you to call in the troops at the White House and you refused to do so.
To our country and act accordingly. Now, we don't want to see fences. We definitely don't want to see armed troops on our streets, but we do have to take a different posture.
I think it's very much, if you recall Washington, D.C. in the early days after 9/11, it may feel similar.
Chuck, why don't you ask her the question? You want to be fair. Why didn't she call in the troops January the 6th when the president gave his speech? Shame on you. Shame on you.
I'm joined by Democratic Senator Cory Booker.
There's another one. Shame on him.
Senator Booker, there's so much on our plate as a country.
He incites riots and every time he speaks.
So, the first question, when should we expect this trial to start and be done with?
Well, I think to get technical off the bat, there's some frustrations about getting timelines set. You need the Republican leader to cooperate in terms of time agreements, but I fully expect it to happen as quickly as possible. And I think what else is going to happen is that we're going to be able to do a lot of things at once. I think we should, if we can get the time agreements from our Republican leader, we can actually hold impeachment trials as well as do other urgently critical things, like getting key national security personnel confirmed as well.
Is there, it's interesting you say it that way, so what you're saying is this isn't an issue with the Senate parliamentarian, this is Mitch McConnell, he's yet to agree on a timeline?
Well, I talked again to Senator Schumer last night about the same concerns that you seem to be asking about. I, for one, want to drive President Biden's economic agenda. We have a real crisis. We have a pandemic. We have an economic recession. We have national.
Where were you Democrats before trying to help President Trump with helping the people?
And that's one of the things that's concerning.
Sending money to the foreign countries.
Is there anything in do you think the impeachment trial should be delayed in order to focus on the Biden agenda, or do you think you guys need to do both at the same time?
We need to do both at the same time. These are all, and I can't think of a president in my lifetime that came to power with so many challenges.
And you were the challenges, spying on his campaigns, attacking him falsely, investigations that went nowhere, a bogus security plan.
Consistently lied to the American people, whipped up far right-wing extremists.
Nonsense. You're the liar.
An assault and a siege on
and have been from the beginning. And you're a racist also.
In mind that this trial is constitutional after he leaves office. I say this, Tom Cotton, a Republican senator from Arkansas, is arguing that since he's out of office, that he thinks the trial's unconstitutional. What say you?
Well, again, I think that there is a lot of people who are going to express opinions with a great degree of certainty. We have policies and procedures as well as a one whole branch of government to be the referee on these things. I believe it is constitutionally dangerous not to proceed. We just had a president of the United States try to undermine the peaceful transition of power.
Lie.
Try to challenge a fair and free election. And
Lie.
And his agents from the moments before, from his son to his lawyer, whipping up a crowd
Lie.
To go attack the Capitol. So I believe fundamentally the Senate has an obligation to act. And I worry about folks who might want to try to make this into a political tit for tat, that they're missing the larger historical picture here. There must be accountability for actions.
And accountability for you too, buddy.
A threat, not just to our Constitution, but to the erosion of our nation.
Senator, when I think about the, say, 24 Senate Republicans that I might put in a category as persuadable for conviction, you know who those folks are. You have pretty good relationships, I think, with quite a few of them. How would you advise the House impeachment managers to design their arguments to win over that group? And you know there's that group that's a little bit more establishment.
There's only one thing he's interested in, you're interested in, Chuck, and that is how to keep Donald Trump from running again. That's the only thing you're interested in. This is all bogus and phony. It was a complete setup by the Democrats and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and Chuck and Nancy Pelosi, and the Democratic Party leadership.
It has got to be a larger perspective, and the arguments have to come, as I imagine they will, from really the dire issues before us as a nation. Will a president be held accountable for what he did? And
will you be accountable for what you're doing?
Historic. What he did was certainly meriting impeachment, and now we have to have a fair trial that I hope the arguments rest, frankly, in the law and on the facts.
Right. Senator Cory Booker, Democrat from New Jersey. As you said, we have so many other things on our plate, but obviously impeachment being a focal point this week. I thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective with us, sir. I appreciate it. President Trump's impeachment, because she says the House was violating due process, but she is also someone who voted against those that wanted to challenge the election results. And she does support censuring the president. Congresswoman Mace, welcome to
at least one person with maybe a fair opinion.
A new colleague of yours who's been in Congress quite a while, Mike McCall, what he put in his statement, because I'm curious how you view the impeachment vote just 5 days removed from casting it. Here's what Mike McCall wrote in his statement. He says, he voted with you, voted against impeachment, but he wrote, I truly fear there may be more facts that come to light in the future that will put me on the wrong side of this debate. I'm curious, are you concerned about that?
Yeah, I am concerned. And one of the things, I gave my first speech on the floor of the House last week. I didn't want to do that as a freshman one weekend, but I stated very unequivocally that the House has every right to impeach the President of the United States. But the fact that we bypassed judiciary, we did not open up an investigation, that we bypassed due process, and that set a dangerous constitutional precedent for others. No matter, even if you think the president is guilty as hell, like many do believe, there has to be due process, there has to be an investigation, we have to go, even if it's through special committee work or judiciary. Those things needed to happen in order for impeachment, really. I think you would have gotten more Republicans on board if it were done with due process and with an investigation.
Now, as you know, some of the issues had to do with timing, right? And there is this sense that, is he an immediate threat staying in office? Do you empathize with that argument that said, okay, there's only a finite number of days here, and this needs to be focused on, and you have to expedite things?
Right. One of the options that was on the table last week when we were going through the impeachment, getting up to DC for that, was that there was a bicameral, bipartisan effort to look at censure as an option that would, one, hold the president accountable for his words and his actions, and two, also prohibit him from holding office again in the future. Unfortunately, the speaker wouldn't let us bring it up for debate or bring it up for a vote. There were measures, there were folks in place in both chambers and both parties that were willing to do that and go that far, but unfortunately we didn't have the opportunity at all last week.
Well, in fairness, Congresswoman, there's a lot of constitutional questions about whether Congress can do this, can bar somebody from ever holding federal office again without going through the impeachment and conviction process.
Right.
What's your case that you could do this without impeachment now?
Well, with censure, that was one of the things that I believe we should have had up for debate. If that it's complex constitutionally, but there were folks in both chambers and in both parties having the ability to look at that as an option, but we couldn't even bring it up for debate or look at that as an option because we were really trying hard to figure out how do we hold a president accountable that put all of our lives at risk. And this was a traumatic event for many members of Congress, and I believe in the days, weeks, and months to come, as we learn more, the worse it's going to get. And we feared for our lives, many of us that day, and our staff. And as you know, my children were supposed to be up there, and if they had been there like they were supposed to be, I would have been devastated. And so we do need to find a way to hold the president accountable, and we're doing that in the press, and you're seeing corporations and companies say, not one more dime to those that objected. We're going to do the right thing. And so there are other measures that I'm encouraged by seeing out there. I want to be a new voice for the Republican Party, and that's one of the reasons I've spoken out so strongly against the president, against these QAnon conspiracy theorists that led us in a constitutional crisis. It's just wrong, and we got to put a stop to it.
What kind of confidence do you have in the Republican leadership? And does it bother you that after the insurrection, after the riots, the two top leaders, Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise, and 130 plus of your colleagues still voted to challenge these results? Does that make you question the leadership's decision making?
I will tell you, for me as a new member, it was enormously disappointing. I literally had to walk through a crime scene where that young woman was shot and killed to get into the chamber to vote that night to certify what was supposed to be a ceremonial vote to certify the Electoral College. And yet my colleagues continued to object, and they knew this was a failing motion. These objections were not going to work, and they were unconstitutional. And so it is enormously disappointing. It's one of the reasons I've been such a strong voice to point out the lies that have happened. Congress had no business overturning the Electoral College, and neither did the Vice President. And I praise Vice
That's
President
why you
Biden for
vote
standing up
and discuss it,
those untruths
young lady.
on January 6th. But we have reconciliation that needs to happen within our own party. We need to rebuild the Republican Party. We need to rebuild our country. And I'm counting on my colleagues to join us, to be that new voice for the Republican Party, to lead us out of this crisis going forward, because our country is counting on us.
I'm not counting on you. That's for sure. You folded like a deck of cards.
I believe she will. And the irony in all of this, Chuck, is that the same people that were complaining and screaming about the president being silenced on Twitter want to silence a dissenting voice within our own party. And so I find that very hypocritical and very disappointing, because we should embrace dissension. We should embrace debate. Part of the American experiment in this country is the ability and opportunity to debate ideas, even when we.
And that's what you were doing on the floor of the Congress when the thing happened. And you should not be condemning that. That is the right of the congressmen and senators to debate the issue about the electors.
We need these voices right now more than ever.
Nancy Mace, a brand new member of Congress from the Charleston, South Carolina area, a Republican from South Carolina. Thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective with us this morning. We appreciate it. And please.
Thank you for having me this morning.